There was a time when my life felt small, not because I lacked opportunities, but because I stayed inside what felt familiar. Same places, same routines, same quiet thoughts I never spoke out loud. I could see a bigger world right in front of me. New ideas, new connections, new possibilities. But there was a wall between us, and that wall was fear. This is not a story about learning English faster. It's a story about what happens when you stop avoiding the things that make your world feel small. If you've ever felt like life was passing just outside your reach, stay with me, because this journey begins exactly there. There was a period in my life when everything felt narrow, not physically, but emotionally. My world existed inside a few familiar places: home, work, the same streets, the same conversations. Every day looked similar to the one before. I woke up, I went to work, I came home, I repeated. On the surface, my life was stable. I wasn't struggling to survive. But inside, something felt unfinished, as if I was living only part of my life. I often felt like I was standing behind a glass wall. I could see opportunities, ideas, possibilities, but I couldn't reach them. Language was one of the biggest walls. English surrounded me everywhere, on social media, in movies, in articles, in job descriptions. It felt like the world was speaking a language I didn't fully understand. I knew basic words, simple sentences, but when English appeared suddenly, my mind froze. I needed time, too much time. By the time I understood, the moment had already passed. So I avoided it. I chose comfort over curiosity. Whenever something felt difficult, I told myself, this is not for me. I believed that English was for other people, people who were smarter, more confident, more talented, not for someone like me. That belief became part of my identity. I didn't question it. I accepted it. At work, I stayed quiet in meetings. Even when I had ideas, I kept them inside. Not because they weren't good, but because expressing them felt risky. I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, of sounding unprofessional, of being misunderstood. So I listened. I nodded. I stayed invisible. People assumed I was quiet by nature, that I preferred silence. But the truth was different. I had things to say. I just didn't know how to say them, especially in English. Over time, that silence became heavy. It followed me home. It sat beside me during dinner. It appeared when I lay in bed at night. I wondered how many chances I had quietly lost, how many conversations I never joined, how many doors I never opened. The most painful part was not failure. It was limitation, knowing that I was capable of more, but not accessing it. One evening, after another long day, I sat alone scrolling on my phone. I watched people from different countries share their stories. They spoke English with different accents, different levels. Some made mistakes, some spoke slowly, but they spoke, and people listened. That moment made me uncomfortable, not because I envied them, but because I recognized myself. I saw what I could become, and what I was choosing not to be. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask an honest question. What if the problem is not my ability? What if it's my fear? That question didn't feel motivating. It felt frightening. Because if fear was the real problem, then avoiding English was a choice, and that meant I was responsible for staying small. That realization sat with me for a long time. I didn't make a decision right away. I didn't suddenly feel brave. But something shifted. The excuses that once felt comforting started to feel heavy. I realized that avoiding discomfort was costing me more than facing it. English was not just a language. It represented everything I was avoiding: new ideas, new connections, a larger world. That night, I didn't promise myself anything big. I didn't set goals. I didn't make plans. I simply decided to stop running. I opened a video in English. I pressed play. The voice sounded fast. I didn't understand everything, but I stayed. For a few minutes I listened, not to learn, just to stay present. When the video ended, nothing magical happened. I wasn't confident. I wasn't proud. But something felt different. The wall didn't feel as solid. It felt like a door, still closed, but possible to open. That was the moment my life stopped feeling completely small. Not because it changed, but because I decided to change how I faced it. Quietly, without announcing it, without knowing where it would lead. I didn't know it yet. But that simple choice to stop avoiding was already expanding my world, slowly, silently, from the inside. The days after that moment felt strangely quiet. Not the heavy quiet I was used to, but a thoughtful one. I didn't rush into studying. I didn't tell anyone about my decision. I simply kept listening. A few minutes each day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes late at night. English became something I allowed into my life, not something I fought. At first, everything sounded unclear. Words blended together. Sentences felt too long. I often felt lost. But I reminded myself that understanding was not the goal. Staying was. I learned to sit with confusion, to let it pass without frustration. That was harder than I expected. My mind wanted certainty, clear answers, fast results. But English did not offer that. It asked for patience. So I slowed down. I stopped switching videos every few seconds. I chose one voice, one story, and I stayed with it. Even when I didn't understand, I listened to the tone, the pauses, the emotion. I began to notice how much meaning existed beyond words. After a week, I tried something new. I repeated sentences out loud, quietly, almost like a secret. At first, my voice sounded strange, unfamiliar, as if it didn't belong to me. I felt embarrassed, even though I was alone. That surprised me. Why did my own voice feel so uncomfortable? I realized how deeply fear had shaped my habits, fear of being wrong, fear of sounding foolish. But I didn't stop. I chose one sentence, a simple one, and I repeated it, slowly, awkwardly, again and again, not to sound perfect, just to become familiar with the sound of English coming from me. Some days I didn't feel like studying. On those days I listened anyway, even if it was only for 5 minutes. I made a quiet promise to myself. No 0 days. That rule changed everything. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. Not because I pushed myself, but because resistance slowly disappeared. English was no longer a task. It became a routine. And routine does not ask for motivation. It simply happens. I stopped measuring progress by what I didn't know. I measured it by consistency. Did I show up today? Did I listen? Did I speak at least one sentence? That became enough. One evening, something small happened. I was watching a video, and I didn't pause it. I understood the main idea, not every word, but the message, the emotion. I smiled, not because I felt fluent, but because I felt connected. For the first time, English did not feel foreign. It felt reachable. That moment gave me courage. I began to imagine using English in real situations, ordering food, asking for help, sharing opinions. I practiced those moments in my head. Not out loud yet, just quietly. English was entering my thoughts, becoming part of how I processed the world. Still, there was one thing I avoided: speaking to real people. That felt like a different level, a level where mistakes would be seen, heard, remembered. I told myself, I'll do it later. But deep down, I knew that moment was waiting for me. Because once you stop avoiding, there is always a next step. Fear didn't disappear. It changed. It became more subtle, more intelligent. It said, "You're improving. Don't ruin it by rushing." But I recognized that voice. It sounded just like the one that kept me silent for years. This time, I didn't argue with it. I simply continued, listening, repeating, showing up. I didn't know it yet, But these quiet days, filled with small effort and no applause, were building something strong, something real, something that would soon ask me to step outside and test myself. And when that moment came, I would not be ready, but I would be willing, and that was enough. After a while, English stopped feeling new. It became familiar, not easy, but present. It was there when I woke up, when I walked to work, when I waited in line, when I came home at night. I carried English with me quietly, like a background sound in my life. My routine stayed simple. Listen, repeat, show up. No pressure, no deadlines, just consistency. Some days I understood more. Other days, everything sounded messy again. But I no longer panicked. I had learned that confusion was part of the process. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. At work, a message arrived. An email in English. Normally, I would skim it, ignore parts, hope it wasn't important. This time I didn't. I read it slowly, carefully. I didn't understand every word, but I understood the meaning. I knew what was being asked, and without overthinking, I replied, in English. The sentence was simple, not perfect, but clear. When I pressed send, my heart beat faster. I waited. Nothing bad happened. No correction, no embarrassment, just a normal response. That moment felt small, but it wasn't. It was the first time English entered my real life, not as practice, but as communication. After that, similar moments appeared. Short messages, simple conversations, quick replies. Each one built a little more trust inside me. I still checked my words. I still doubted myself. But I didn't freeze anymore. Outside of work, I pushed myself gently. I changed my environment. Instead of studying at home, I went to public places, cafes, libraries, parks. I listened to English around other people. At first, that felt uncomfortable, as if someone might hear me repeat sentences, judge me. But soon, I realized something. No one cared. Everyone was busy with their own lives. That realization was freeing. It removed a fear I didn't know I was carrying. Encouraged, I took another step. I joined an online group. People from different countries, different accents, different levels. English was the only language we shared. At first, I only observed, reading messages, following discussions. Then one day, someone asked a question, a simple one, and I knew the answer. I hesitated. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Old fears returned. What if my grammar is wrong? What if I sound strange? I took a breath, and I typed. Slowly. I sent the message. The conversation continued. No one corrected me. No one laughed. They understood. And that was enough. That moment changed how I saw English. It was no longer a test to pass. It was a bridge between people, between ideas, between worlds. Around that time, something else shifted. My confidence grew outside of English. I spoke more in meetings. I shared ideas without rehearsing them 100 times. I trusted myself a little more. The discipline I built while learning English began to shape my life. I woke up earlier. I planned my days better. I finished things I used to postpone. Not because I became a different person, but because I learned how to stay when things felt uncomfortable. Of course, fear still appeared. Before conversations, before meetings, before speaking up. But fear no longer stopped me. It simply walked beside me, and I walked anyway. English had become more than a language. It was evidence that I could change, that I could learn slowly, consistently, without drama, without perfection. Looking back, I see that this phase was the most important. Not because of visible results, but because of who I was becoming. Someone who did not wait to feel ready. Someone who acted first and let confidence follow. I didn't know it then. But these ordinary days, filled with small efforts and quiet courage, were preparing me for a moment that would redefine how I saw myself. A moment that would make me realize what English had truly given me. The biggest change was not fluency, it was awareness. One day I noticed how naturally English had entered my life. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was simply there, in the background, in my thoughts, in my reactions. I no longer paused every time I heard it. I no longer felt that familiar tension in my chest. English had stopped being a wall. It had become a window. Through it, I saw more than language. I saw people, stories, perspectives, ways of thinking I had never considered before. And with each new idea, my world felt a little wider. I realized something important. English did not change me overnight. It changed me through repetition, through patience, through the decision to keep going on days when nothing felt special. Looking back, those quiet days were the most powerful, the days with no motivation, no clear progress, no encouragement, because those were the days I learned to rely on discipline, on routine, on myself. I stopped asking, "Am I good at this?" I started asking, "Am I consistent?" That shift changed everything. There were still moments when I felt unsure, moments when words escaped me, moments when I made mistakes in front of others. But my reaction was different now. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize for existing. I corrected myself, or I laughed, or I continued, and the world kept moving. That taught me a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Most people are not judging us. They are busy living their own stories. The fear we feel often exists only inside our minds. English became a mirror. It showed me how often I underestimated myself, how often I waited to feel ready, how often I chose safety over growth. And it taught me that readiness comes after action, not before. Today, I still learn English, not because I am behind, but because learning has become part of who I am. I enjoy the process now, the slow improvement, the small discoveries, the moments of clarity. I no longer rush toward an imaginary finish line, because I understand something I didn't before. There is no final moment when you arrive. There is only movement, and movement is enough. If you are listening to this and you feel stuck, I want you to hear this clearly. You do not need to change your life all at once. You do not need to be confident. You do not need to know exactly where you are going. You only need to stop avoiding what scares you, just a little. Listen for 5 minutes, speak one sentence, write one message, and then do it again tomorrow. The path will appear as you walk it. English may be your challenge, or it may be something else. But the lesson is the same. Growth happens quietly. In moments, no one applauds. In efforts, no one sees. And one day you will look back and realize you are no longer the person who was afraid to begin. That realization is powerful, not because it makes you better than others, but because it reminds you of your own strength. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening, for reflecting. And if this story stayed with you, carry it forward. The next time fear asks you to wait, remember this. Confidence does not come before action. It grows because of action, quietly, patiently, one honest step at a time. If you've made it to the end of this story, take a moment. Notice how quiet it feels, not empty, just honest. A life doesn't become bigger the moment everything changes. It becomes bigger the moment you stop avoiding what scares you. English was never the real challenge. Fear was, and every time you stay, listen, or try again instead of running away, your world expands. Slowly, silently. In the next videos, we'll continue this journey. Not with pressure, not with perfection, but with small, honest steps that actually last. If this story felt close to you, then this place is for you. Stay, the world gets wider one brave decision at a time. I'll see you in the next story.